I never thought a single afternoon could change the way I saw myself forever. It started like any other weekend, the kind where boredom creeps into your bones, where your room feels smaller than it really is and every corner seems to mock you with your own unfulfilled plans. My older cousin, Vanessa, had been staying with my family for a few weeks, and I had always admired her confidence, her energy, the way she carried herself in every room she entered. But that admiration had always been mixed with a kind of fear, the same way you might fear a storm that's beautiful from afar but terrifying when it hits. She had a sharp wit, a commanding presence, and the unnerving ability to see through every tiny lie I told myself. That day, she walked into my room unannounced, humming some upbeat tune, and my life began to twist into a direction I could never have imagined. She leaned against the doorframe, hands on her hips, her eyes scanning my messy floor, my neglected clothes, and the stack of video games I had left in a careless pile. I braced myself, expecting criticism, but what came instead was a grin that made my stomach tighten. "You're too lazy, you know," she said, tilting her head. I tried to laugh it off, but she wasn't having any of it. In one fluid motion, she turned, pulling a strange bag from behind her back, a bag filled with something that made my heart pound with confusion and unease. "We need to have some fun," she said, eyes gleaming with mischief. I frowned, trying to gauge what she meant, but the next moment, she dumped the contents onto my bed. My eyes widened when I saw it, a full maid outfit, complete with frilly apron, lace gloves, stockings, and even a small feathered headband. The realization hit me like a punch to the chest, and I froze. What is this?" I asked, voice barely audible. Vanessa laughed, a sound that carried both amusement and authority. "You're going to wear it," she said. My protest was immediate and fierce. I told her no, that this was ridiculous, that I wasn't going to anything, but she had already moved too fast. She grabbed the outfit, holding it out to me, her eyes narrowing in a way that left no room for negotiation. The sheer audacity of her insistence made my chest tighten. I wanted to say no again, but something in her expression made me hesitate. There was a dangerous thrill in her eyes, a challenge, and suddenly, the idea of refusing seemed impossibly small. She guided me toward the full-length mirror in my room, my reflection staring back at me in disbelief even before I touched the outfit. She smiled, almost cruelly, and whispered, "You're going to look amazing. Trust me, you just don't know it yet." I felt trapped, cornered, and strangely exposed. The fabric was soft between my fingers as I reluctantly began to dress. The skirt fell awkwardly, too short for my comfort, and the lace gloves made my hands feel alien. Every item I put on felt like a layer being stripped from my old identity and replaced with something completely new, something I wasn't ready to confront. Vanessa watched with satisfaction, giving small corrections here and there, fixing a ribbon, tugging the hem, adjusting the headband until I looked, at least in her eyes, perfect. And yet, in my eyes, I barely recognized the person staring back at me in the mirror. The reflection was almost someone else, a fragile, vulnerable version of me that I had never allowed anyone to see. When she finally stepped back, I felt the weight of her gaze, the intensity of the situation pressing down on me. "Turn around," she said softly. My heart raced, my body stiffened, and I obeyed. The skirt twirled slightly as I moved, and I heard her sigh with admiration. I hated that sigh. I hated the way it made me feel, a strange mixture of embarrassment and something I couldn't quite name. My face burned with a combination of shame and confusion, but as I looked at myself, trying desperately to retreat into the familiar lines of my old self, I noticed something shifting. There was a curiosity in my own eyes, a flicker of fascination that I wasn't ready to admit. I wanted to hate this, to reject it entirely, but part of me, a very small, secretive part, was intrigued by the transformation, by the way the outfit altered not just my appearance but the air I carried around me. Vanessa clapped her hands softly, breaking the spell of self-consciousness. "Perfect. You're perfect," she said, her tone both commanding and warm. I swallowed hard, trying to force the words out of my mind, to remind myself that this was ridiculous, a game, a joke. But she wasn't done. She pulled out a small tray from her bag, filled with brushes, powder, and lip gloss. "You need a little finishing touch," she said. My eyes widened again, and I felt my throat constrict. "Makeup?" On me. She seemed to sense my panic and smiled gently, guiding me to sit. Relax, she said. I'm just going to help you see what's possible. You might even like it. I shook my head, trying to protest, but the words felt hollow. I had never worn makeup in my life. The brush felt strange against my skin, the powder dusting over my cheeks like a whisper. My reflection blurred as color was added, highlighting features I had always ignored or disliked. My lips felt foreign, glossy and new, but I didn't pull back. Part of me was fascinated by the transformation, by the way Vanessa's hands seemed to guide me into a version of myself I hadn't known existed. When it was finally done, she stepped back with that same victorious smile. Look at you, she said, voice filled with admiration. I did, and I barely recognized the reflection. My eyes, my face, even the way I carried myself in the outfit, it was all different. And for a moment, just a fleeting moment, I felt seen. But it wasn't comfortable. Not yet. I turned in a slow circle, feeling every inch of fabric against my skin, every sway of the skirt, every tug of the gloves. My heart raced, and I could hear Vanessa watching, her satisfaction almost tangible. She stepped closer and whispered, "This is you, at least the part you've never let out before." I wanted to argue, to deny it, but the words caught in my throat. She was right, in a way that made me both terrified and exhilarated. The afternoon passed in a blur of laughter, awkward poses, and careful corrections. I stumbled through the experience, tripping over my own insecurities, but Vanessa never let me fall completely. She guided me with patience and precision, pushing me further than I thought I could go. And yet, every time I looked at my reflection, every time I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, I felt a strange tension, part embarrassment, part curiosity, part something I didn't have a name for. By the end of the day, when the outfit had been folded and put away, when the brushes were cleaned and the room was quiet again, I was left with a lingering sense of transformation, a quiet storm that had begun inside me without my permission. Vanessa left my room with a wink and a promise that we would continue tomorrow, and I was left alone with my thoughts, my reflection, and a new awareness that things were never going to feel quite the same again. I had been forced into something I didn't understand, something I thought I would hate, but a part of me was already eager to explore the changes it had brought. I didn't know it then, but that single afternoon was only the beginning. The storm of discovery, embarrassment, curiosity, and transformation had only just begun, and my life was about to become a story I couldn't escape. The next morning, I woke up with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. The memory of yesterday's ordeal lingered, the way Vanessa's eyes had assessed me, the subtle encouragement in her voice, the way she had guided my hands as if she were sculpting some hidden version of me into existence. I tried to shake it off, to tell myself it had been a one-time thing, a cruel joke, but even as I sat on the edge of my bed, I could feel my heart beating faster at the thought of her coming back, of having to face the inevitable repetition. And then the knock came, light but insistent, carrying the same playful energy that had undone me the day before. I hesitated, but I knew resisting would only make it worse. Vanessa's voice came through the door, sweet, teasing, and commanding all at once. "Morning. Ready for round 2?" I swallowed hard, my mind racing, and then the door opened, and she was there, holding another outfit, slightly different, more elaborate, more demanding in its presence. My stomach turned as she held it up. The lace was finer, the skirt longer, the accessories even more intricate. "I thought we'd step it up today," she said. My mouth opened, but no words came. I could feel the tension in my chest, a coil of fear, excitement, and something else I couldn't name, twisting tighter the more I stared at the delicate fabric. I didn't want to comply, yet the curiosity was unbearable. I reached for the dress with hesitant hands, feeling the smooth fabric slide across my fingers, heavier than yesterday's, almost purposeful. Vanessa guided me again, adjusting the straps, smoothing the folds, whispering instructions in my ear, the kind of whispered authority that made rebellion feel futile. I couldn't help but notice the reflection in the mirror as I stepped into it, the way my figure changed, the unfamiliar sway of the skirt, the subtle power in the way I now moved. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. As Vanessa applied makeup, more boldly this time, emphasizing my eyes, shaping my lips, and adding a touch of blush that made my cheeks burn in real life as much as it did in the reflection, I felt a strange surrender washing over me. I hated that it felt good, that part of me was starting to enjoy it, that my reflection was slowly becoming someone I didn't recognize but was starting to want to explore. By the time we were done, I was trembling. My reflection looked poised, delicate, and unmistakably feminine. Vanessa's eyes sparkled with satisfaction. "You're learning," she said softly, almost lovingly, as if this was a gift, not an imposition. I wanted to scream, to run, to hide, but instead, I found myself walking toward the mirror, examining every detail, every nuance of the transformation. Something deep inside me stirred, a flicker of acceptance, or perhaps curiosity disguised as fear. Vanessa clapped softly. "See? You're amazing. And don't you dare say otherwise." I could only nod, my voice caught in my throat, my mind spinning with confusion and new sensations. I was seeing myself in a way I had never allowed, a version that was fragile yet strangely strong, vulnerable yet captivating. The day passed with a strange rhythm. Vanessa had me perform small tasks around the house in my outfit, insisting that I carry myself with grace and confidence. Every step, every movement, every gesture felt alien and yet exhilarating. When she asked me to serve tea or tidy up in my delicate attire, I found my heart racing, not from embarrassment alone, but from the thrill of being seen, the thrill of embodying something I had never dared to. It wasn't easy. My hands trembled as I carried dishes, my voice faltered when I greeted our parents in the outfit, and yet, each moment, each small success, gave me an unfamiliar sense of accomplishment. Vanessa watched with careful eyes, giving guidance, gentle corrections, and sometimes, just a quiet smile that said more than words ever could. Her presence was intoxicating, confusing, and oddly comforting, like a storm you don't want to run from even though it drenches you completely. As evening fell, I found myself alone in my room for the first time that day, staring into the mirror. The reflection no longer seemed like a stranger. There was a subtle shift in my own perception, a softening of my resistance, a growing acknowledgement that perhaps, just perhaps, this version of me wasn't something to fear but something to understand. The fear was still there, the embarrassment still raw, but now it was intertwined with curiosity, with an almost magnetic pull toward the persona Vanessa had coaxed into being. I traced the lace trim of the skirt, feeling the gentle texture against my fingertips, and realized with a shock that part of me wanted to wear it again, to explore this new form, to see what it felt like without the immediate pressure of someone else's gaze. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I hadn't expected desire to creep in so quickly, hadn't expected my own mind to betray me so easily, but there it was, undeniable and unrelenting. The following days blurred into a rhythm I had never imagined. Vanessa became both a guide and a mirror, reflecting parts of me I had hidden from even myself. Each outfit she presented, each session of makeup and guidance, peeled back layers I didn't know existed, exposing insecurities, strengths, and vulnerabilities I had long ignored. I began to notice how people reacted differently to me when I emerged from my room, adorned in the delicate fabrics, moving with a tentative grace I was only beginning to master. There was fascination, surprise, admiration, and sometimes even laughter, but the laughter no longer felt like mockery to me. Instead, it became a test, a challenge I had to navigate with poise, with courage I didn't know I possessed. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to feel a sense of control, of ownership over the transformation, a subtle power in embracing a persona I had once thought humiliating. Yet, the tension remained. There were moments when I would catch a glimpse of my reflection and feel a jolt of panic, a reminder that this wasn't supposed to be me. I wrestled with questions about identity, about authenticity, about how much of myself I could allow to change before I lost the person I once was. The duality was exhausting, thrilling, and terrifying all at once. Vanessa, ever perceptive, seemed to understand without words. She pushed when I faltered, encouraged when I hesitated, and celebrated each small victory with a quiet pride that made my chest ache with a strange longing. And through it all, I realized something I hadn't admitted even to myself: this wasn't just a game anymore. It wasn't just about obedience or amusement. Something profound was unfolding, a transformation that reached deeper than skin, fabric, or makeup. It was reshaping how I saw myself, how I understood my own identity, and how I navigated the world. By the end of the second week, I found myself anticipating the sessions, craving the guidance and the challenge, even as I feared the exposure it demanded. My reflection had become a place of both confrontation and discovery, a mirror that forced me to reconcile shame and curiosity, fear and acceptance. Vanessa had become both a tormentor and a mentor, guiding me through a journey I hadn't chosen but was slowly learning to inhabit. And somewhere deep inside, I felt the first glimmer of something I hadn't expected, a fragile, tentative sense of pride, of ownership, of possibility. I didn't know how far this path would take me, or who I would become along the way, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty: the Sissy Maid outfit, the makeup, the transformation, it had awakened something inside me that could never be fully undone. The reflection staring back at me was no longer entirely foreign. It was a beginning, a revelation, and the prelude to a journey that would challenge every assumption I had about myself, my courage, and the person I was capable of becoming. By the third week, the strange rhythm of my days had settled into something both terrifying and exhilarating. Vanessa had begun introducing new challenges, pushing me further than I ever expected, and with each challenge, I felt the boundaries of my old self fray a little more. One afternoon, she handed me a carefully folded outfit, even more elaborate than the last, with ribbons, lace, and delicate frills that made my heart race in both fear and excitement. "You're ready," she said simply. I didn't question it, because I knew that resisting was futile, but a part of me, the part still clinging to my old identity, shivered at the thought of stepping into it again. As I dressed, my hands trembled, fumbling with ribbons and straps, but Vanessa's steady guidance reassured me. She adjusted the outfit with a precision that made it impossible to resist, smoothing the fabric across my shoulders, fixing the hem just so, and placing the headpiece with an almost ceremonial care. I caught my reflection mid-dress and froze. The person staring back at me was no longer completely foreign, yet there was still an undeniable strangeness in the curves of the skirt, the sheen of the stockings, the subtle glow of the makeup that had become almost second nature. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and electrified all at once. Vanessa smiled, sensing my hesitation, and whispered, "You're beautiful. Stronger than you think." Her words were both comforting and unnerving, forcing me to confront the truth I had long ignored. I was changing, and I had no choice but to embrace it or be consumed by my own fear. That afternoon, she had me perform small tasks for the family, each carefully designed to test not just my composure but my confidence. I carried trays of tea, dusted the living room, and even helped prepare dinner, all in my delicate, frilly attire. At first, every step felt awkward, every movement forced, but as the hours passed, I began to notice a subtle shift. I was learning to move differently, to hold myself with a grace I never thought I possessed. The fear hadn't vanished, but it had transformed into something else, an intense awareness of my own presence, of the power in embracing this unfamiliar persona rather than hiding from it. The real turning point came that evening. Vanessa, seeing my progress, decided it was time to take the experiment beyond the house. "We're going out," she announced casually, brandishing a small clutch. My heart skipped a beat. Out. In public. I felt my chest tighten, panic rising as I imagined the eyes of strangers, the inevitable questions, the judgment I was sure would follow. "No," I stammered, but her eyes held a firmness that made further resistance impossible. "Yes," she said simply. "You've come this far. Now you'll see what you're really capable of." We left the house, stepping onto the street, and I felt the weight of every gaze, real or imagined, pressing down on me. My hands were clammy inside my gloves, my steps hesitant, but Vanessa stayed close, a reassuring presence at my side. The world outside my room was different, vast and unpredictable, and every passerby was a potential threat to the fragile confidence I had been building. Yet, something remarkable happened as we walked. With each glance, each small acknowledgement of my presence, I felt a strange power surging within me. People noticed me, yes, but they didn't mock. Some smiled, some gave a polite nod, and for the first time, I realized that my fear had been far greater than the reality. Vanessa guided me to a small cafe, insisting we sit where we could be seen. The entire time, my heart raced, my mind filled with a whirlwind of anxiety and thrill. I felt the adrenaline coursing through my veins, the strange combination of exposure and exhilaration. I caught glimpses of my reflection in the window across the street, and for the first time, I wasn't entirely horrified by what I saw. There was still vulnerability, yes, but also an undeniable sense of presence, of power, of self that I hadn't dared to acknowledge before. Vanessa smiled at me, and in that moment, I realized she had been guiding me not just into an outfit, but into a new understanding of who I was, a version of myself I had buried under fear, expectation, and shame. Returning home, I felt exhausted yet invigorated. The sensation of navigating the world in my new form had awakened something within me, a courage I hadn't known I possessed, a curiosity I couldn't ignore. I spent the evening alone in my room, examining my reflection, touching the soft fabric of the outfit, and slowly, almost reluctantly, embracing the reality that I had changed. The process was far from over. There were still doubts, insecurities, and questions about identity that gnawed at me, but for the first time, I allowed myself to consider the possibility that this transformation could be something more than a game, something more than a temporary imposition. Over the following days, I noticed subtle changes in myself that went beyond clothing and makeup. I began experimenting with posture, with voice, with small gestures that felt natural in my new form. Vanessa encouraged me, guiding me with gentle corrections and subtle affirmations, reinforcing the idea that this transformation was about exploration, discovery, and courage, not shame or ridicule. Each session became a dance between fear and curiosity, embarrassment and pride, exposing parts of myself I had long denied. I realized that the Sissy Maid outfits, the makeup, and the performances weren't just external, they were a mirror reflecting hidden aspects of my identity, challenging me to reconcile who I had been with who I was becoming. One evening, I found myself alone, sitting in front of the mirror, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating the contours of my face and the delicate frills of the outfit. I traced the edges of the skirt, the ribbons, the lace gloves, and felt a mixture of emotions I couldn't name. There was fear, certainly, and a lingering embarrassment, but also something stronger, something that demanded acknowledgement, fascination. I was fascinated by the way the outfit transformed not just my appearance, but my perception of myself. I was fascinated by the courage I had discovered in performing tasks, in moving through the world in a way that challenged every expectation I had ever had. And most of all, I was fascinated by the realization that Vanessa had seen something in me I had never dared to see, guiding me gently, relentlessly, toward a truth I had been too afraid to confront. I was capable of embracing change, of exploring identity, and of stepping into a version of myself that was both vulnerable and powerful, fragile and resilient. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a strange calm, a quiet excitement that pulsed beneath the surface of my fear. The transformation had moved beyond clothing, beyond performance, and into something deeper, a journey of self-discovery that was just beginning. I didn't know where it would lead, or how far I would go, but I knew one thing. The Sissy Maid outfit had unlocked a door I could never close again. Behind it was a world of possibility, challenge, and courage, and for the first time in my life, I was eager to step through it. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind, a delicate collision of fear, exhilaration, and self-discovery that I could no longer ignore. Vanessa's guidance had evolved from gentle insistence to a subtle push toward independence. She no longer merely instructed me on how to wear the outfits or apply the makeup, she began challenging me to inhabit the persona fully, to move with confidence, to speak and act with the poise that had once felt impossible. Each morning, I would wake with a mix of anticipation and dread, knowing that today would push me further than yesterday, but also knowing that with each push, I was discovering parts of myself I had never dared to explore. One evening, Vanessa suggested something that made my heart hammer so violently I thought it would burst from my chest. "Let's try a small gathering," she said casually, as if inviting me to tea with neighbors. I froze. A gathering? In this outfit? In front of people who didn't know me, who could judge me in ways I wasn't ready to confront? My protest rose immediately, a torrent of self-doubt, fear, and instinctual embarrassment, but Vanessa's steady gaze halted me mid-sentence. "You've come so far," she said softly, yet firmly. "It's time to see how far you can go. I'll be with you, every step of the way. But you have to trust yourself." I swallowed hard, my hands clammy, my legs trembling. And yet, something inside me, the part of me that had begun to awaken over these weeks, whispered that this was the ultimate test. That this was the moment to reconcile fear with courage, hesitation with acceptance. Slowly, I nodded. Vanessa's smile was both proud and conspiratorial, the kind of smile that makes you feel seen in ways words cannot capture. She handed me the outfit for the evening, even more elaborate than before, delicate lace, flowing frills, subtle embroidery, and accessories that demanded attention without apology. I dressed carefully, my hands more confident now, guided by muscle memory and Vanessa's gentle corrections, and as I gazed at my reflection, I felt a profound shift. The person staring back at me was not a stranger. She was a version of me I had never known, yet somehow recognized as part of my own identity. The gathering was at a friend's house, a small, intimate circle of people who knew Vanessa and me. My anxiety surged as we arrived, the sound of voices, laughter, and clinking glasses filling the air like an overwhelming tide. Vanessa stayed close, guiding me with subtle touches and whispered reassurances. I stepped inside, every step deliberate, every movement a conscious effort to embody the persona I had been cultivating. At first, every gaze felt like a weight pressing down on me, every subtle glance a judgment, but slowly, something remarkable happened. People smiled, nodded, complimented the outfit. They didn't mock, they didn't sneer, they acknowledged me. And in their acknowledgement, I felt a strange exhilaration, a sense of validation that had nothing to do with the outfit itself, and everything to do with the courage it took to inhabit it fully. Vanessa guided me to a central spot, and with each task she asked me to perform, pouring drinks, serving snacks, even just standing with poise, I felt a growing confidence, a fragile yet undeniable power. My heart still raced, but the fear was no longer paralyzing. The reflection in a nearby mirror caught my eye, and I saw a person standing tall, graceful, aware of both vulnerability and strength. The duality was intoxicating, a thrilling revelation that the persona Vanessa had coaxed into being was not just a performance, but an authentic expression of parts of myself I had long suppressed. As the evening unfolded, I began to relax, to inhabit the persona fully, to move and speak with the grace and subtle confidence I had been practicing. Laughter became natural, gestures fluid, eyes meeting others without shame. Vanessa watched quietly, a proud smile playing on her lips, and I realized that this journey was never about humiliation or obedience. It was about discovery, about embracing parts of myself that had been hidden, about finding courage in vulnerability and strength in authenticity. Later, as we returned home, I was quiet, processing the overwhelming intensity of the night. Vanessa didn't speak immediately, letting me dwell in my own thoughts. Finally, she said softly, "You see? You're capable of more than you ever imagined. You've learned to face fear, embrace change, and find beauty in unexpected places." I nodded, my chest heavy with a mix of exhaustion, pride, and revelation. She had been right. This journey, the outfits, the makeup, the performances, they had unlocked a part of me I had never dared to acknowledge. In the following days, I reflected deeply on what had happened. I realized that the transformation was no longer just external. It had reshaped the way I saw myself, the way I approached challenges, the way I understood courage, identity, and acceptance. I had discovered resilience in vulnerability, strength in surrender, and pride in embracing facets of myself that had once terrified me. The Sissy Maid outfits had become more than clothing, they were a mirror, a lens through which I could confront fear, explore identity, and celebrate transformation. Vanessa remained my guide, mentor, and confidant, gently encouraging me to continue exploring, to refine, to grow. And through her guidance, I discovered that transformation is never just about appearances. It's about courage, acceptance, self-discovery, and the willingness to step into the unknown. I had been forced into something I thought I would hate, but in surrendering to it, I found empowerment. I found beauty. I found a version of myself that was brave, authentic, and alive in ways I had never experienced before. As I looked in the mirror one last time that evening, dressed in the intricate outfit, the lace gloves, the soft makeup, and the carefully arranged ribbons, I saw not a stranger, not a performance, but a whole, complex, and authentic self. The journey had begun in fear and hesitation, but it had led me to courage, acceptance, and self-love. I had been forced into a Sissy Maid outfit, but in the process, I had found something far more profound, the power to embrace who I truly was, and the courage to step boldly into every reflection, every challenge, and every transformation that life had to offer. The story didn't end with a single outfit or a single moment of bravery. It was ongoing, a continuous exploration of identity, courage, and acceptance. But for the first time, I felt a peace I had never known, a peace rooted not in conformity, not in escape, but in embracing myself fully, in every layer, every reflection, every challenge, and every choice. The Sissy Maid outfit had been the beginning of a journey I would continue for the rest of my life, a journey toward authenticity, courage, and self-discovery, and I was finally ready to walk it without fear.